Genau, machen also jetzt den ersten Block Neuerungen in
So we're
Check-MK. Da
starting
haben
with
wir
the first
3
block,
Themen.
news in Check.mk. We have three
Wir
major
haben die Vorträge ein
topics
bisschen
here.
aufgeteilt
We
nach
split
den Kategorien von Check-MK, nach den Werks, wer sie
presentations
kennt.
up to categories.
Der erste Block
The first
geht
category
über
would
das
be
Metric-System.
the metric system.
Also früher hat man gesagt Performance-Daten.
We used to say performance data.
Dann zeige ich euch die Neuerungen am
Then I'm going to show
User-Interface.
you
Und dann
the
als drittes
GUI
kommt
news. And the third block
der Marcel
is
und erzählt euch über
with
Neuerungen
Marcel,
im
and
Reporting-Modul.
he's going to talk about the reporting module.
So, ich muss kurz auf die Uhr schauen.
Let me check the watch. How long do I have now? 20 minutes? As most of you may know, development in Check.mk is organized in types of works. A works is something that is a visible change to the user. So it's a commit in the version control. A works is actually a result. It could be a bug fix or a security fix or a new feature. These works do have numbers and they can be looked up in the internet or in the software itself. And that's why we have always listed the numbers so you can look up details if you're interested. If you say, whoa, this feature is interesting, then just look at this 4-digit number and then you can look up what's actually behind it. The works have different categories, which are color-coded. These are critical changes. There may be 10, 15 per year. Then the medium ones, the yellow ones, and then the blue ones are the little details. This is a rough classification, just so you can see what is important and what is not. Of course, I'm not going to be able to introduce everything, but the most important changes we're going to look at in detail. One big improvement is custom graphs. What we have built on the metric system, in our new metric system, is something that was already in the raw edition. It was realized through PnP by Nagios. So check plugins give you the metrics, and then you can see the curves and select a time frame, like 4 hours, last day or something. It had been implemented in the first step, but what is new is the ability to define your own graphs through an editor in the GUI by selecting metrics in the monitoring and turning them into a common graph. And you can also calculate, add things, subtract things, do average, all that. So it's a real free selection of metrics. I can do something that the other templates cannot, which is taking metrics from different hosts and services and put them into one graph, and I can even do that from different sites. It's not very dynamic or rule-based, but as a dynamic, I can say add this to the curve, and then I can see it. It all goes through the GUI, and I want to show you a live demonstration of that. Let's see if I can get this screen visible here. So let's take a look at the browser. There are many ways to get to the custom graph. One would be if I'm at the views and click edit. The custom graphs are something that every user can create for themselves. You don't need Vato rights. It's not a configuration. It's like a dashboard report. So that's why they're here. So I'm starting a new graph, which is mine for now, but I can make it available for other users if I want to. So if you know it from views, it's the same principle, same code. The right to make it visible is similarly organized as it is in views. Every graph has its own unique ID, which is important because they can be also included in report, and then this report would be referencing this ID. So if I change it and keep the ID, then I can still find it later. So what I get is an empty graph. Let's see the... can you see the font here? Is this of a nice size? Okay, in that case, I'll do it with a big cursor. So first I need to add a host here in the first field. It's an auto filling. Then I can see what the services are that this host offers. This is a test machine not running for long. So this will be a graph with gaps in it, but it should be alright for this demonstration purpose. So I have CPU load, then I can check the metric I want. So these are the metrics or performance data that are offered. Some of that are not even graphed normally. Then I have this selection here. You understand, once you understand how the tool works, the RD tool is organized in a way that the data is being condensed after a while. So if I look at the metrics from the last hour, then these three values will be the same because they are the same value and they don't need to be compressed. But if I look at 2 weeks, then I will not have one value per minute or per check, but I will have a it will be compressed, and then it could be maximum, minimum, or average, and this is the type of compression I can look at. And this is a special feature in the custom graph that I can actually do that. So I could have a graph where minimum and maximum are shown, and then I can see whether there's a deviation in the past or not. So I have this metric in here. Now I want to see 1 to 5. Same value. So they have the same color now, which is not very useful. So pick another one. I can say that I want to see this one as a mirrored field to the bottom. And what I could do theoretically now is picking several, and by doing so I have different options and do calculations with them. So for example, I say the maximum, then these two metrics are combined to form a new matrix, which is the result of the operation I just performed. And using this, I can actually perform very complex calculations and comprise data in a way that I couldn't do before. I can also add fixed constants, for example. Why would I need this? Well, for example, I could add a line and then I take a constant and use it for calculation. So I could take a value and divide it by 100 to get a percentage, for example. Then first I would include 100 and then I can use it to multiply or divide with that. These custom graphs could also be opened in the view mode. Then they look just like normal graphs. And as usual, through the context menu, I can add them to a report, to a graph collection, or put it onto the dashboard. There's a second option to get to the custom graphs, which is if I have an existing graph, I also have the option to say take this and turn it into a new custom graph. And then it's already pre-filled with the values I had, and I can also see the formula that's behind it. The total, for example, here is the sum of other values, and then I can edit it and put a new host in it or whatever I want. So that's... are there any direct questions about custom graphs so far? Hello, I'm Michael from Faurecia. This question has popped up on the mailing list. May there be the option at some point to add this to large groups and to have dynamic graphs based on the membership of a group and to fill it based on the membership? Yes, I'm going to show you a new feature later on which may go into that direction. Right now the data is not dynamic at all. You have to add all the curves manually. It's simple, but it's not dynamic or flexible. But I'm going to show you something that may answer your question in a minute. More questions? Hallo, gibt es dann die Möglichkeit durch eine Konfiguration mit Flatfiles oder wo ist die Konfiguration dafür? Die Konfiguration ist wie immer in einer Flatfile Python gespeichert. Das kann man also leicht skripten oder generieren. Danke, das war meine.
Okay.
So let me minimize this and we're going back to here we go. There are a few minor updates. With the details for every host and service, there's now a table in the metric system. We have included the thing that the performance data, which come naked from check, so to speak, they now have a scale, a unit, and you can see it here in the table. And they have a color. They also have a correct name and not just numbers and letters. Something new that has come up into our graph system is somebody told me I have to use laser pointer on this side. The previews you can see here so you can see other time frames, little images. You can click on them and then you directly jump there, which is a quick way of getting the data you want. By configuration, you can also choose which ones are shown here on the right. It's a feature that we were missing so far. Then there is an important change looking at performance. We have a new RRD format. And let me tell you about the history of this development. When we started with the whole checkmk thing, the default was PNP for Nagios, like we still have in the Raw edition. And per service, one round-robin file was started, where all the metrics from the service were included, which is nice because I only have one disk write per round-robin archive, regardless of the number of metrics. So performance-wise, this is not a bad idea, but that's a problem. There is no way to change the number of metrics. So if we are in software development and we say, well, for the check we need a new metrics, now we're giving you an additional information for something, this is not possible. And the information is not only missing, but there will not be any updates anymore. The graph just stops at that point. RRD was not able to do that at the time. There was no option to change an RRD on the fly. So what we did, add flexibility. We said, well, then per metrics we create our own RRD. So with a new metric, new RRD, everything works. Metrics can come and go, easy, everything works, but this needs a lot more disk I/O because the metrics now are distributed more widely over more blocks on the hard drive. So this also leads to problems if you have a large installation. I mean, disk is being conquered by metrics mostly with CheckMK. So this solution is something that works, but performance-wise, it's not perfect. So what to do? The breakthrough was that we have found to go back to one RRD per service, but this needed an extension in the Roundrobin tool. Toby did develop that for us, or his partner did in the project. So what we can actually do now is taking existing Roundrobin files and change them, and not through an export to XML and back. We had tried this migration at a customer, and it would have taken several weeks to do this. So this wasn't an option. This new feature, the Roundrobin II, is actually natively converting it in C code. So metrics can be added, subtracted, deleted. You can even change RRDs on the fly. So now we're back to one RRD per service, but it's not quite that trivial because CheckMK needs to use the new features from the RT2. I mean, the program has to be aware that there's something missing and has to implement it. But it does work now. We support both formats now. You can also decide per host whether you want the old or new format. So you can also do a step-by-step migration if you want to. The migration to the new RRD files happens while working, so you don't have to take the monitoring tool offline. Even if it takes a few hours, I mean, one RRD file after the other is being converted, so not a critical thing to do. What does the new RRD format do? Now they are in a new directory, which is CheckMK RRDs. The old ones are still in the var PMP by Nagios in Perth data, and that's how you can differentiate them. You can configure it with a rule set, and you can say what resolution you want the data in. If you start a new site with CheckMK, you automatically get the new RRD format. If you take an existing site and update it, then usually you stick with the old system. I mean, no magic happens if you don't want it to. But if you want to do a migration, you go into the rule set, change to the new rule set, and just open this command. Then the existing data is being converted once. You do need the CMC, so you do need the Enterprise Edition for this. Any questions about the RRD format? Sorry, I need the microphone. Well, the RRD tool was included in the module because it does require a certain version. We tried it with a new version and it did work. So this is true for all distributions? Yes. This was not a trivial thing to get it on Century 5, but it does work. Starting with which version do you have the new format in? Is it in the 128? Or is it starting with the 124? I don't think it's in the 128. Actually, I'm not sure. But it's in the works detail. So there's a small thing, a funny little thing here. There is a pin, an analysis tool. So I can take this little black line here and put it at a certain spot that is interesting to me. I just click this point, and then I have a new line here with the exact time and the exact value. And this point in time is now saved per user. So if I open another graph with the same user, the pin is opened at the same spot. So, for example, I say there was a problem at a certain point in time. I set the marker and then I do an analysis what happens with other hosts and services at exactly that point in time. Work 8344. Now there's a web API to get the graph data. I get exactly the information that the graph contains, including all the curves. It's not a low-level access, but it's actually corresponding to the data you see. I have shortened it a bit here. I deleted a few values, but you can see you get the start time, end time, the steps in seconds, the curves. For the curves, you even get the color, the title, the type of display, and also the values. And now I want to talk about the one thing I mentioned earlier. There's something completely new. There's a question talking about the graphs or the graph API. Is it possible to get a deployment system and use it to set a point and say this was the deployment, and then overall the graphs I can see at this point there was a deployment. So here was an interesting curve, like if I have foreign influences, maybe I can put like a pin there automatically. No, you can set a pin manually, and you can, if you know the time when the deployment was, of course you can open the time frame, but there is no event management in that way. Thank you. Combined graphs is something that we had on the roadmap in the last conference as an idea, but it did happen. Right now the graphing system is built like this. I can look at the service and look at the values. But of course there could be a situation, I have a pool of 10 web servers and I want to see them in one graph and compare them, or a host group or something. So of course I could put them all into my custom graph and build my graph. Does take a little. It's not very flexible, because if there's one to be added, then I have to manually add it to the graph, and it does take a while. So we have come up with a method to create a third type of graph. So different from the custom graph and the template graph, we have the combined graph. They are very easy to use. If you have a view with several services on it, there will be a new button, combined graphs, and you click it. And then you get a combined graph for that. I'm going to show you that live in a minute. It is designed so that all graphs of the same type are being combined. So like if you have a couple of services with different metrics, then of course there will be different combined graphs. You can select whether you want sums, average, lines. It's super easy to access, and it's dynamic too, because in the URL to the graph you don't have the final list of services, but the filter criterion which I use to get there, which could be a host group or anything you like. And with that in mind, I'm going back. So I do a search for any metric. I mean, I said metric, of course I mean service. Any view. So of course services that are similar would be my first choice. So there's this new button, Combined Graphs, and if I click it, I do get a graph which combines all the values of the services. I mean, optically it looks the same, But what I do get is the sum of these three services I just selected. We use sum as a default setting because that always works. But I could also say I want to have it stacked. Maybe I can zoom out a little. So the load of these three servers is my stack here. As I cannot stack lines, this total line is not very useful, but there's also minimum and maximum as a number. Well, this is all my local computer, so this server is always the same. It's not very interesting. Looking at a different service like HTTP response times, and here we can use lines. Zooming in a little. Here I have a view of different services. I mean, I only have the host automatically because the service name is always the same. The view automatically picks a host, and this is the response time. It's very easy to access. It's a standard graph, which of course I could put into my dashboard. I could edit it as a custom graph. Of course, in that moment, I lose the dynamics. But what I have here in front of me, I can set a bookmark for it or save it. And if a new service is added that matches my filter, it will automatically be added to the graph. What I cannot do is change the graph template, at least not in the GUI. I mean, I could do it with the command line. As basic operations, there's sum and average, which is pretty much the same, but in average you divide it by the number of factors. But there is a difference if I have an average over time, where the number of objects is variable. For example, the first half of the month I have 5 web servers, and the second half I have 6. And then I'm doing an average. Of course, for the first half I need to divide by 5, and for the second half I need to divide by 6. And the graph knows that. So per value, the division is by per value of metrics. So the pin is still set. I have a question about usability. To remove it, I mean, sometimes it's accidentally. You have to like remove it. No, you just click on an empty space. Yeah, just click anywhere and then the pin is removed. There's another new feature. I think I forgot to mention that. You may have noticed that we have a maximum and minimum is grayed out. Why is minimum grayed out? Because this is, in theory, quite a useless value, because I'm showing you the minimum of the maximum. So as soon as you condense data, you have a value which is being reduced or condensed to one value per 5 minutes, and then you take the maximum, and then if you take that value and take the minimum, I mean, that's a nonsense number. Let's be honest. For many years we hadn't noticed, but if you actually calculate it, then this value has no mathematical meaning. And that's why it's grayed out. I can, of course, click it, which leads to reading out the minimum out of the round robin file, not the maximum. So by clicking the title, you can choose the aggregation function you need, and you get different values, which is a mathematical fact. So if I have a spike once a day in my CPU load, and then I take the average, then of course this peak will get lost in the aggregation. I have to see or decide what I want to see, and this is something I can do now. This is not a mathematical error, it's a logical issue. As soon as I condense data, information gets lost. If you do not want to condense data, you can change the rule accordingly, but you need a big hard drive to do so, if you want to get rid of the aggregation. Going back to the Beamer. There is a list of small works. I don't want to mention them in detail. They are in the presentation, so just you can read up on them. I mean, we do publish all this later after the conference online, so it's all in there. Any questions right now about the news in the metric system? Yes, Philip. I have one question about the metric system. Talking about the zoom. I mean, you can use a mouse wheel to zoom in and out, but we do miss a feature, which was in the PNP before. Setting 2 pins, and it zooms exactly into the area you just selected. Manually, this can be done in the options. It's a bit complicated. You can go to explicit time frame, but you have to type in the values. Would be really nice if you could have that, because different from entering a time frame. I mean, you can see a graph in the overview, and then you can select what you need, and it would be nice to have. We had another question in the back. Also talking about BMP, there used to be the ability to show a trend with a graph. I missed that with the graphs, with CNC. No, trends is something we do not have, but we are considering talking about the topic of trends. Lars has some information about that in the roadmap, also talking about capacity management, because calculating a trend, PNP does it with the RRD tool. It's nice if you have a line, but a correct trend calculation is more than that. We have Roland, our student worker. He's working on machine learning, and he is working with that topic. So if you have a trend, you look at the past data. You have to look at variations and how strong are they. Are there periodic things that occur? So there is more complex mathematics behind it to get forecasts that actually make sense. And what we want to have is a trend forecast with a curve, with a corridor where there's a certain probability that my value will be in there, and then with a probability of 95% my value in the future will be in that area. This is proper trending, something I can work with, something I can plan with. But this simple line can be nice at times, but I don't like that there's proper mathematics missing in that. I mean, what does that line say except I'm just prolonging optically what I have. So something is on the way, but it will take a little time because it's very complex. Unfortunately, I do not have the microphone, so I cannot. So we're getting this onto the video. So talking about pinning, you said that you set a pin, and then you go through different graphs and looking at the problem. Is there an option setting a pin to get like all the graphs on one page? So you can, like, can you build a page? Yes, if you have different graphs in one page, they are always time synchronized. So I would just have to draw all the graphs together and set a pin, and then I would have all the information I need. Yes, you have to select the graphs yourselves, but I mean, you can do graph collection. So collect your graphs, and as soon as they're on one page, they're always synchronized, and the pin will always be in the same spot for all the graphs. If I set a pin in an area that's already condensed, can I see minimum, average, maximum? Depends on what you have picked with the 3 columns, this is what is being shown. So the pin is also synchronizing with what I choose? Yes. Okay, thank you. So it used to be in PNP von Nages that the aggregation function is always set to maximum, except for a very few exceptions, because maximum is usually what you're looking at. But now you can pick it explicitly, which may be important if I am looking at a total maximum or a minimum. I mean, sometimes I have to take the minimum of the minimum, and then it's correct again. I have one question about custom graphs. Cooperating in teams, and you have a custom graph. It's bound to your own user. So if your colleague is on holidays 3 weeks, I cannot change it. I can publish it. Well, there should be the ability to clone it. If you see something, yes, cloning I can, but it's a bit complex. If there were a way to have a global user or a global setup, then currently this is not possible. You could start a user just for this. This is also about views and reports and everything. You can only edit your own, this is true. Is there an option to take combined graphs and to enter lines from other performance data? No, the combined graphs are a one-on-one mapping of existing templates. Maybe we can come up with the idea how to combine that, but if you take the templates and know how to format them, then you can go to the local shared checkmk web and create your own template. That would be an option. But then you cannot, well, you can get data from different hosts, yeah. If you want to create your own template, you can define one. So let's try and move on to the next topic once again. In the end, if you didn't have a chance, you can still ask questions. Because I do have a second topical block, also talking about graphical things, which is the user interface. Here also we had a few general changes. There are many works in there, but few big things. I'm just mentioning the most important ones. A lot is about security. checkmk is being used by bigger and more important customers who have high expectations when it comes to security. So the customers did ask for a timeout for login. So now it's, if you log in, you get a cookie, and then this is unlimited, which is very convenient. But it does not confer with every security guideline there is. So now what you can do is add a timeout after inactivity. So if I stop clicking, login just runs out, which is not the default. The default is what we had. If the timeout happens, I'm being redirected to the login screen and being logged out automatically. This automatic refresh of pages does not count as activity, because that wouldn't make any sense. Then I would just have to get a view open, and then that's it. The setting you can find here as a global setting. You can activate that. It can also be added per user in the user profile. It is important that I can start users who do not have a timeout for special applications. Similar thing would be the login limitation. So you can now make sure that you cannot use 2 different browsers to log in at the same time. So if I'm inactive shortly in one browser, then the session can be, well, it is being made available for the second browser, and then I can log in with the second one, and then I'm being kicked out on the first one. But the session the refresh here does count as an activity here. So while I'm opening with one browser, I cannot use a second browser to change things and do things. A setting or a change that is very smart on a technical end would be the logwatch pages. Who of you uses the classical logwatch? So there are a few who use it. It's quite simple because it automatically works, but you know the logwatch pages which show me what alerts have shown up and I can acknowledge them, but these pages do require access to files where the log messages are, and they are in a local instance. And what we have chosen as a solution is something that we knew from PnP for Nuggets, which is doing HTTP access to the remote page and accessing them locally, either through the browser, which is one option. So the user browser gets a different URL and accesses this page directly, but it does require double login, and the links back from the page usually don't always work because I am on a different server. One other option, which is better, would be a remote proxy, and that the web server, the master, gets the HTTP subs automatically. So I manually start this route as a proxy rule, but it's not ideal. None of it is great. What we really like is live status, the separate monitoring, and what we do already have, and that's our medium of choice for getting the logwatch data. Now live status is extended, so we can access the logwatch files. So all the logwatch is now, I mean, it does work without a problem on live status. So no proxy rules, no HTTP. It's part of the GUI. I can just click it without any link issues, and it just works without me having to do anything, which is great. So this is a problem that we had for years, and now it's off the table. We also did a little cleanup with bookmarks. The bookmark snap-in is something that has existed for a while. What is new is that bookmarks can be administered in orders, and like in Fuse, you can also make bookmark lists available to others, like users. So the bookmarks are now administered in the same way. So as an admin, you can create a bookmark list and then make it available to others. So have pre-configured views or something. Also links to external tools. That's all no problem. That all works. It's a little navigation menu for your users that you can create for them. One minor thing with views, if I create a clone from a view, it's per default visible to everybody if you're an admin. It's just a minor thing, but there were annoying situations occurring from this. So this is now simple by default, and it's not public anymore. So now if you clone a view, it's only visible to yourself, and then you can make it available if you want. The concept of stale services, maybe one word on that. It has been around for a while, but if you haven't discovered it yet, in CheckMK, apart from Kit1 and Unknown and OK, there's also an obsolete service, a stale service, so it cannot be checked anymore. For example, because the CheckMK agent is not available. A server is down. And now with normal Nagios, all services do not go to crit and unknown, but they stay with the state they were in before. If the file system is 89% full before the server crashed, then it will probably still be at 89%, but the service is marked with the last time the check was performed. And if this gets older than a few minutes, usually would be 1 or 1.5 check intervals, and then it's grayed out. So you can see the data is out of date, and then we call that stale. And what is new? Stale services can also be a hint to a problem, or maybe I only have the right to see the service but not the CheckMK agent. Then I wouldn't see a problem, but my service is not running. So now there is the option, if there are stale services, which is an exception of course, then here in the technical overview there is a new line shown which only shows up in that case, and I can see stale services and I can click on them and see what's behind it. Are they identifiable? I did hear that one. So are these stale services notifiable? No, because a stale service has or is the result of any check gone wrong, which may be any CheckMK service. So a database is down, for example, and then the table data is getting stale. So if you have an agent only for one service and it doesn't give you a value, then it would be an unknown, right? Well, it should go into a warning if there's a missing agent section, but you can also look at the state of missing agent sections and set it to crit. I mean, you can set that option yourself. Stale just means service was not performed. So nothing really changed on a basic level here. So in theory, anything else should have shown you that there is an alert or a fault somewhere. I mean, that is the reason why we let it go stale, so that we can look at the follow-up alarms and stuff. We have one more question. Looking at passive services that are dependent from CheckMK services, and they're being shown in the GUI if there's a timeout category. But if I have a service that only runs between 6 and 8, for example, in the evening, then even though everything works as I configure it, I would get stale services all the time, right? That's a good point. Question is, what do I want? I look at the GUI and I have CPU load 70, and then for me that would be important for me to know whether this information is 5 hours old, and this is where the stale mark is for. But if I do not want to have the check at a certain time, it's still 5 hours old. So a deliberate stale is something that is not planned for. Maybe I did misconfigure it. Would it be an option to not create a, a stale in a certain time? Well, we have a customer who has files which are only available per day. So they can only be 2 hours old. But of course, at night they are older than 2 hours, so they would have to be put somewhere else. Well, what we do plan as a new feature, and I'm not sure how far we are with development here, is to get check parameters and make them dependent on the time period. Then you could configure the check saying at this time it can be there, at another time the file can be missing. So this would be nice. It would solve my problem, but is this being worked on? So 1 to 2 months is what we have planned for, but it's not going to be in the 140, but it will be there. It's in the works. The stale factor is a global parameter, right? Can this be set like in the near future to have it rule-based for certain things? Like we have connections sometimes where just there's a bad connection because that's the way it is, and then we get stale. And if it's a global stale, then of course this doesn't work for us. Well, the staleness is a feature of the GUI. The monitoring does not decide whether it's stale. is just giving you the staleness state, so the number of check periods that we're late. So this is the number we get. If it's less than 1, all good, because then we're still in the check period. And you can set a threshold. I mean, it's a GUI setting, really, how you want to visualize that. And in the GUI, we don't have rules. Could there be rules? We don't have plans for that. I have 20 people sitting around, and we have so many stale nodes there. There must be a workaround. Yes, probably. I don't have one right now, but because I'm on stage talking here. There was a question to my left. Talking about technical overview. One thing I hear often is that people would like to have a filter there. I mean, that could solve the stale services problem. So I could do a filter for the technical overview that only shows me certain things, make it part of the dashboard. And I think the dashboard filter does not work on the technical overview, right? Yes, we did think about that. Right now, the live status request is hard-coded into the technical overview. It would be an interesting option to see that it reflects a certain view and also takes the settings from the view. So, for example, I want to have a certain number of elements in the view, and of course, it links back to that anyway, and then you can configure it. But that would be recoded first, or would have to be recorded, and then this should be an improvement. For one customer, we built a plugin in Python where we created further technical overview. So this is possible, but you have to write a bit of Python for that.
Okay, Matthias is lucky because I don't have so much to show you today. So I can make up some time. So I'd just like to tell you a little bit about new things right here in this module. So for those of you who are using the raw edition, you can just listen to it for now, and then maybe based on that, make the decision that you might go to the Enterprise Edition, because all this is only available for the Enterprise Edition, except for the whole availability here. Okay, so we have a couple of works less than Matthias had in his speeches. So we're just going to skip through that. I would like to talk about this now. Okay, so you mentioned, well, are those the new slides? I don't think those are the new slides, but anyways, we are talking about annotations, availability, option. So what you can do here, there are areas in the annotations that you can mark so that they may have a downtime. They're visible as a downtime, and you only forgot to set them beforehand. So you can also have an indicated downtime, and you can revoke that this way. So same options that you see right here. Okay, annotations from availability are now going to also be visible in these reports, as you can see right here. You can see it somewhere. Oh, right here. So annotations are now different. They are also part of the reports now. Let's talk about availability options. So when it comes to availability, we now have the possibility to indicate the host alias. So in addition to that, we also have the possibility, oops, sorry. We also have the possibility to not display the host name itself. However, that is only being used if the alias is shown. So if both options are chosen, in that case, instead of the host name, you are going to see the alias and not the host name. Other than that, the host alias is visible in addition to the host name. And those are really the old slides, I'm sorry. It's okay. All right, so when we talk about availability options, we can now reclassify the host state to unreachable. So that means right here you have the option to choose unreachable phases and either choose OK or down, or you just keep unreachable. That's default. In addition to that, we now have another availability option. You can determine how many status changes from the log files are indicated in the report. So by doing that, you of course can then limit the length of the report. In addition to that, we also have some works when it comes to host and service information. Okay, so we have the option now, we created the option to graphs that are in the report, and in the title you can have the host name, host alias, and service description. And we can do that right here. And that could either be in the template of the report or in each individual report that you can choose. Okay, so the empty slides in here now, I'm sorry, but now we have report elements. So we created the possibility to have dynamic text that can be implemented in the report that can be accessed via the URL. So in this text, you can then also choose the included monitor macros like $hostname, for example, so that they can be replaced automatically. Otherwise, the text is going to be in the report as is. In addition to that, we also have the possibility to have several graphs that can be included in a report. So far, that was only possible by adding a view element. And in this view, you could then have several graphs. But with this new option, multiple graphs, you can now do it directly in the report. You can also, well, since work 8392, you can also have the regular report, not the header or a specific area in the report. You can now also show an image. And that wasn't possible before. You can choose that now, so it's embedded image, and the picture is then shown at the exact point where you really have it where you need to be in the report. Okay, then we have 3 smaller works as well, and I'm not going to go into detail about those. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much.